Almost nothing feels better than getting a book worth $25 in a dollar bin. But there are also many comics that can be found commonly in dollar bins that may not have a lot of financial value, but provide so much enjoyment that I think they are worth well and above that dollar. And to me, finding a comic like that is just as valuable as finding a real financial steal. After all, most of us are in this hobby not simply to make a profit, but because we simply love comic book stories. So today, I want to start up a new series where I talk about comics that you can usually find for pretty cheap that I think will be worth way more than you pay for them in terms of the enjoyment that you will get from them. And so today, we're going to start off by talking about the title Classic X-Men. Now, if you're not familiar with this title, basically, it reprinted some of the earlier Uncanny X-Men issues, mostly, if not all, from the classic Chris Claremont run, which included some of the most important stories in X-Men history, like the Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past, and lots of other important ones. Now, these reprints were super important back when they were first printed, because it was really hard to get access to these stories unless you had bought them off the rack. And so if you got into collecting, a few years after they came out, you were almost out of luck because you didn't have eBay to run to, you didn't have trades being printed, and so you were just left to hope that maybe my LCS has one, or that I can find one at a comic convention, or somehow maybe through Mile High Comics pay 10 times what the comic is actually worth. But it's really hard to access these stories, and so these reprints were really valuable back then. And even though today you can access these stories a lot more easily through things like trades, these are still great books to pick up because you can buy 6 of them for about $6, which is still going to be cheaper than a trade. And me personally, I just always like the feel of a classic comic book. I mean, I certainly read trades, but I would much rather just have 6 of these in my hand than a trade paperback. But I'm curious, what do you think? Does it matter reading in a traditional comic book or a trade or reading digitally? Are those all the same to you, or do you prefer one or the other? Well, for me, if everything else is the same, especially the price, if I can get it for the same price or even cheaper, then I would always prefer to read from the classic comic. I don't know if it's just some sense of nostalgia or what it is, but I love this format. Now, in addition to reprinting these awesome stories, another awesome thing about this title is that it gave you new cover art for those classic stories. And so the first, at least a dozen issues had new covers by Art Adams. I really like this one. But if you're a real fan of the original art, well, you only need to turn to the back inside cover and you can still see that original art. And so you've got that plus this new cover. Now, another awesome thing about this title is that since Marvel didn't have to pay writers and artists to create the new story, they were just reprinting something, and maybe Claremont got some royalties, I don't really know. This meant they didn't have to run ads to help generate revenue to pay those writers and artists. And so the good news of that meant that after the reprint was finished, there were still tons of extra pages. And so they would fill those pages sometimes with some pinups, but always this backup story that was sometimes related to the reprint, sometimes not, but this would be a new original story. And alongside of that original story, you also got some more cover art on the back cover. Plus, you would get some new art on the inside, what's called the front piece. And often this would cover the whole page. Here you can see this is just a smaller drawing by Art Adams. But once again, just new, free art. So this book contains so much story, so much art, that it is well worth $1 for any X-Men fan. Again, especially because it's reprinting some of the most classic stories in X-Men history. Now, I've been picking up a lot of these lately, and in fact, I want to put together this whole run, but I'll show you just some of my favorite covers that I've recently gotten. And these first few are all Art Adams on the front cover. We have Classic X-Men number 9, which reprints the first appearance of the Phoenix. And on the back, you have Nightcrawler. Now, before I show you any more issues, of course, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I'd really appreciate if you do so now. Next, we've got Classic X-Men number 12, which of course contains an homage to the original X-Men number 1. As I've mentioned before, I'm a sucker for homages, so I love this cover. And on the back, it has a Magneto cover. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but the back cover always related to that second original story that was in the title. Now, jumping ahead quite a bit past that Art Adams run, we have Classic X-Men number 36, which of course is part of reprinting the Dark Phoenix saga. And I love yellow covers and I love red covers. So my goodness, is this in my wheelhouse. And this is by an artist I'm not really familiar with, Steve Lytle. And so he did the front cover here. Here's a good example of where the whole front piece or inside front cover is a full art piece. And on the back of this, you had this Banshee and more of a McTaggart cover that seems kind of strange. I don't know what this dude down here is. That looks like some kind of clone or something, but really interesting. But something interesting about this issue is this, I don't know if it's with this issue, but eventually Marvel starts thinking, and you know what? Maybe we should start running some ads. And so it's not too big of a deal to start off with. So here you just have the inside back cover instead of having the cover art from the original issue. You just have an advertisement for some other Marvel comics here with the Nth Men. But over time, this title becomes less exciting to me because then it becomes just like a normal issue full of ads, and it's just the reprint. It loses the backup story. It loses the back cover. It does still have a new original front cover, and so it's still cool to pick up for $1 to get that new art and again to be able to read that story. But it's just not nearly as awesome as the earlier issues. And here's an example of a comic like that. It's X-Men Classic, and they actually switched the title from Classic X-Men to X-Men Classic. I don't know what the reasoning was behind that. I guess just saying X-Men first sounded better. I don't know if it also denotes kind of the change in having more ads. But I love this Mike Mignola Wolverine Brood cover, and so it's a great book. I love the Brood storyline, so it's still worth picking up. But look at this. It's just a regular ad back cover. You've got ads throughout, and so it's just a reprint of whatever issue this was. It'll tell you, yeah, here at the beginning. So this is just a reprint of X-Men 155, and so still worth $1, but just not nearly as cool as those earlier issues. Now, before I go, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite all-time X-Men story? And in particular, if you have a favorite Chris Claremont story, I would love to hear that in the comments below. Also, tell me what you think about this series and if you have any suggestions of books that I would look at in the future. Of course, again, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I'd appreciate if you consider doing so. Like all those things that help this channel grow. Thanks for watching. I enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you in the next one.